everyone. We're just about to get started with our session. So thank you all so much for coming, and we're going to get started.
Let's go on to our first question. I believe our first question is going to be a true or false. Okay, so this is a very general statement, but what do you think about this statement? Not all stress is bad. Is this true or false? Yeah, so believe it or not all stress is bad. The whole point of the session is to see how we can prevent stress and how we can manage it. But in some cases, some stress is good for for promoting motivation in terms of finishing our assignments and goals for the day. Okay, our next question is going to be 4 options. So what are some ways to prevent stress in college and beyond? We have getting at least 30 minutes of exercise per day, joining your institution's wellness programs, reducing caffeine consumption, or is it going to be all of the above? Yeah, so preventing stress can come in many ways. There's physical exercise, 30 minutes of exercise. There's also wellness programs, which we'll delve into further exactly what wellness programs entails. And there's also things like reducing caffeine consumption and nutrition. Okay, let's go on to our third question. This is going to be another true or false. So in 2017, almost half of US work sites offered some type of health promotion and or wellness program. Do you guys think this is true or false? Yeah, so US worksites actually put a lot of money into these wellness programs and health promotion programs. So if you are a college graduate or if you're even in college, institutions have a lot of wellness programs that you can look further into. Okay, we're on to our fourth question. So what type of wellness programs are available for students and employees? There's free recreation and fitness classes, peer counseling services, nutritional health services, or is it all of the above? Yeah, so wellness can be kind of vague term when you first mention it, but wellness consists of many avenues. We have recreation and fitness, so physical wellness, peer counseling, so behavioral health wellness, nutritional wellness as well, so food and dietary options. Okay, let's go on to our last question here. This is how we can get support. So who can you go to for more postgraduate support? We have college career advisors, behavioral health professionals, family and friends, or is it going to be all of the above? Yep, so just like we reiterated in the past questions, there are several ways to gain support in terms of wellness and stress management. So there are career advisors to look at how you can manage your goals. There are behavioral health professionals to look at how we can tackle your emotional well-being, as well as friends and family to offer support and well-being throughout. Okay, so let's look at our winners for today's quiz. I like the name Stressless, that's good. Awesome, congratulations, Maloney.
So without further ado, we're going to start introducing our panelists. But before we introduce Aisha and Maloney, we're going to actually introduce our speaker for tonight.
So right now what I'm doing is I'm the founder of a company called Vivensity, and we are creating a product for empowering students, teachers, and families and parents. We've extended it to parents and families because it's very essential for learning general life skills. And especially since COVID has started, it's become even more essential and more important. So a lot of schools are very interested in this, and it's been a fun journey. By experience and education, I'm actually a technologist. So I studied computer science and statistics, and I worked in several Bay Area technology companies. But I had a lot of passion for yoga. So on my 50th birthday, I went and became a certified yoga teacher. And then before I got into this work of helping students, because I think I was inspired by the time when my oldest son was in 11th grade. There were 5 suicides in his school. We live in the Palo Alto neighborhood, so this was Gun High School. You probably have all heard of that. Maybe if you're in the Bay Area, you would. And so I thought once my kids go off to college, I wanted to do something much more meaningful that I felt strongly about. And so I had no background in it, no idea what and how I would go about doing it. But then I decided I wanted to do something to help these students. And so I started Vivensity. And I also, to learn more about it, I also got certified as a life coach. So that would help me understand and speak to people. So I think hopefully that's enough. And maybe we'll get to more as we go further.
Of course, and we actually have a few slides about Vivensity if you'd like to talk more about it.
Oh yeah, sure. So the app is actually there, like the key things that we discovered. I wanted to pack in all the things that I've learned in my life journey in nice ways so that students and adolescents and people could learn them sooner in life rather than wait for many years to absorb all of that. And as I did all my research, I found that a lot of the time we're so focused on managing what's happening outside us that we're not taking the time to go inwards and understand what's happening inside us. And our true life experience is actually what happens inside us, especially what's happening in our mind. And to understand that better and to be able to balance that, it's really important for us to do some introspection and know a little bit more about who we are and what we are and how we react to things. And so there were 2 kinds of things that I wanted to help students with. One was the day-to-day situations, because when things come up on a daily basis, then one thing happens, you get upset, maybe you get a bad grade, and the next thing, a friend of yours says something mean to you, and then a third thing happens, you fight with a parent, and suddenly it seems unsurmountable. You feel like, I can't handle this. But if you knew that there was a place you could go which had reliable, quick, actionable solutions, that would make you feel less agitated, upset, stressed, and you would be able to actually function better. So that was one thing, to be able to solve your day-to-day issues. And then in addition to that, I felt that just being able to solve your day-to-day issues is not enough. We also need to learn how to live a balanced and meaningful life. And for that, what I've noticed from my personal experience and a lot of the literature that I read is that, we focus a lot on managing our time. But what I really feel is important is that we should manage our energy, because no matter how much time we have, if we don't have the right kind of energy, we'll probably not be able to get the things done. And to make that happen, how does that happen? How do we balance our energy? And the way we balance our energy is by paying enough attention to our mind, our body, our emotions, and our connections. And connections covers connections with yourself, connections with other people, connections with nature. Sort of connections help you define your purpose in life. So if you pay adequate attention to all of these, you will be able to live more of a balanced life. Most of us are really strong with 1 or 2 of them. And usually the area that we are not very strong in often leads to our day-to-day issues. So for example, if you're not very strong with handling your emotions, then you'll probably on your day-to-day, you might have some relationship issues, you may have some communication issues, so things like that. So once we understand the relationship between the 2, then we can figure out how do we, sort of refresh. And so our product also has, in the app we have created, they are like fun activities, 5 minutes, it just takes 5 minutes, but it sort of rewires the brain and creates generates energy, and it helps you focus on your mind, your body, your emotions, and your connections. So those are the 2 components of the product that we have. Yeah. And then, so this is actually a presentation I had done at another ICC event, in which they had asked me, what have I learned in my life journey? In a sense, how do I summarize that, especially in the journey of the startup? So one of the things is that I really started with, I had no idea how I would do this, right? I really wanted to help the students, but I didn't know how. So when you have a very big problem and you don't know what to do, just take the first step and the next step and the next step. Don't try to think of, oh my God, how am I going to do this big, huge thing? And that's what it's been. We've been doing this for 4 years now, and slowly, the first thing I thought is, okay, let me at least talk to my children, ask them about how, what they might have wanted when they were in high school. And then that led to talking to their friends, and that led to talking to their parents and teachers. And slowly, things started getting connected. Then I started going to conferences and things like that. So once you take the first step, and then just think of the next step one at a time. Try not to get overwhelmed. The other thing was stay focused on the impact that you're trying to make. So sort of what results are you trying to get, so that you don't get sidetracked by the day-to-day issues that come up, that, you know, this is part of the journey and it's okay. So little quibbles with people, little differences of opinion, all of those, you know, just keep them small. Those are the small things. So keep them small. Don't let them get big and out of proportion. And then the third thing is, I've always believed in you to make the journey interesting and fun, because that way, no matter what happens at the end, at least all along you had a good time and you did the right thing. And those are the key things. And so that way you try to bring out the best in yourself and the best in the people who work with you and around you. And that way you'll never fail. So those are the key things. Yeah, and then of course there's another slide. So telling about the fun that I had on my journey, I think the next slide shows that because of this journey, and I didn't know where I was going, I got invited to very interesting events. So one of the bottom pictures you see is like Jim Hoff. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with him, but he's the Iceman. He actually has climbed Kilimanjaro and all with only his shorts. It's like he teaches a breathing technique that you can create a certain environment in your body that you can go into ice. So I was at this event where I had actually, you see me in that little picture at the bottom in the water, ice. It's a bucket of, it's sort of a jacuzzi filled with ice. And we sat in it for 3 minutes after doing the specific breathing technique that he had. And then the other ones are also interesting. I met some very interesting people, Lisa Nichols and Geelong Tupten. And then on the top left is, I got invited to a brain training seminar in Seattle. And that talk costs around $15,000, but I was invited for free. So I was very lucky. And they actually put probes in your brain. They measure your brain waves, tell you what kind of alpha, beta, gamma, what is happening in your head. And it's a week-long experience. It's done by Dave Asprey. He's the one who does all that bulletproof diet and bulletproof coffee and stuff like that. So it's a very, very interesting program. And I learned a lot about myself. It was a very interesting experience. And then, of course, there are some other pictures of the journey as well. So my whole point is like, you know, sort of the destination of life is not very, very interesting. So make sure you enjoy the journey.
Thank you so much for your insight. I think that's a perfect segue into our panelists. So Aisha, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, Aisha. I graduated from college last June, and I've been working as a software engineer at Zillow Group since, in the Trulia office in San Francisco. And my team primarily works on the Zillow Offers product. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with it, but it's the new service that Zillow launched last year, which essentially allows customers to sell their homes to Zillow as an entity, and allows Zillow to resell homes. So yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you guys about the transition from college to postgrad.
Thank you. And Maloney, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Maloney. I just graduated from NYU this past May, and I just started my master's in publishing at NYU again. So I actually finished my first semester yesterday. And I've been interning at publishing agencies throughout my time in undergrad, and I'm getting my master's in publishing. So eventually I hope to be a children's book editor, and I'm really excited to talk to you guys about postgrad life.
Thank you. So we're just going to go into, we have a series of questions that we prepared for our panelists. So Aditi and I are just going to take turns talking through each of the questions.
So our first question is pretty broad, just to get a range of experience that you guys have experienced. So our first question is, what were some of the major changes that you noticed between your life in college and your life in post-graduation? This can be anything academic, social, financial, but just what were the main takeaways or changes for you yourself?
So I guess in terms of the biggest difference that I've noticed between undergrad and grad school would definitely be like the academics. I've been enjoying my grad school academics a lot more because I'm more focused on what I'm going to be doing in the future. So I guess if you're somebody that's considering grad school versus industry, I feel like grad school might be a good thing to look into, because if the reason that you don't want to go is because you're tired of school, which I definitely was when I applied, it's definitely a lot different than undergrad and high school. So I think that the academics and the things that you learn feel a lot more rewarding. I guess like the biggest source of anxiety after I graduated was definitely financial struggles, and especially because I feel like I graduated during the pandemic, I had this kind of like sudden option of just staying at home for grad school and not having to like be in New York and pay rent there. I'm currently living with my parents. So I think that when you graduate, there is like this sense of like financial struggle, especially if you don't graduate with a job, which I didn't. So I think that that's definitely something that I'm still learning how to prepare, like to get used to. And it's definitely something that you sort of have to keep in mind as you're graduating and I guess learn to accept that everyone's in the same boat and we're all struggling to find a job or to make our future plans. So it's really hard to not be discouraged when you walk out of school with so much debt, as I'm sure that a lot of you will. But keep at it would be my advice.
So for me, I guess there's quite a few lifestyle changes. The first being, I mean, having a job is a large responsibility, right? Like taking at school, it was like, okay, if you do poorly on a test or you don't do your work or something, it purely affects you. Whereas now you're responsible for your own work as well as like a product and something that essentially is a paying product, right? It makes money. And so having that kind of responsibility is, I mean, that was definitely a factor of anxiety for me because every time I would I would do some work, um, it would be like, this isn't school, right? Like it actually matters. It's actually going to go into production. People are actually going to see this. So it's definitely different. And I think imposter syndrome is very real, especially in the tech world. I know it's something that people face a lot because you're on a team with people who have like 20 years of experience, and you constantly may feel like you don't know a lot, compared to other folks. And so I think that was also something to sort of adjust to and just understand that, like, that person has worked 20 years longer than I have. They've accumulated a lot more experience. Um, and I think the learning from that is that you just have to keep learning every single day, to get there eventually. And then in terms of lifestyle changes, it was definitely very hectic because I also was living at home and I would commute to the city every day. So my commute would take 3 hours of my day, and my day essentially became like wake up, go to work, and then come back and it was already like 8 p.m. If I tried to go to the gym or something, it would be like almost 10 p.m. And so I feel like I sort of became burnt out in that phase because it was just this very mundane thing. So I think the pandemic has actually been very nice for me um, because there's more to your life now, right? It's not just work and back. Um, so I think that's all I can think about for now. But I think those are probably two of the largest changes that I've seen.
Thank you for both sharing those experiences. And Preeti, I imagine that you've spoken to many students about their transition period and how they dealt with it.
Right.
So, do you have any insight on how students and college students deal with this type of period?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it is a big, Ayesha mentioned that it's a transition and I've had both experiences as well, because I did two graduate degrees. I did a master's in computer science and I was enjoying being a student so much that I did another master's in statistics, or in the reverse order, but whatever. So it seems like sometimes it'll be good, and especially if you have some sort of assistantship that they're paying for your studies. But the transition then from student to becoming actually the same thing as being responsible, everything that you do, it's not just a project that gets shelved after you're submitted it. Taking on that responsibility can bring a lot of nervousness for people, or also can also become excitement, right? Because now you're doing something that really matters and that will energize you and you to be extra careful with what you're doing, being more, aware of what you're doing. The other thing is the social aspect, because many people, it's very easy to get along in college, make friends, because they're all there in a certain space. But once you start work, then the kind of communication you need, the kind of network you need to start building, or, making friends becomes a little harder. So you'll also have to find those skills, right? So how do I communicate? Also, sometimes in meetings, many times, how do we defer to someone? How do we interrupt? How do we, there's just the social skills are very different from when you're with friends and working in a class versus when you're in a work environment. And so some of these things also become, these are all useful, interesting things to learn. And the other thing is about stress, like, what we also mentioned in the quiz, that anything, stress is actually very helpful also. It's only when it becomes unmanageable, because most of our lives, we will have stress. Every little thing causes stress. Like, I need to get up in the morning. I need to go to, if you call it stress, it becomes stress. But we need to go a little bit deeper. I think we've used this very general term stress to encapsulate a lot of different things. So anytime, even if you think you're feeling stressed, just pause and say, am I tired? Am I hungry? Am I overwhelmed? And in fact, I'm going to segue a little bit, but I wanted to share with you my favorite book right now. I have a lot of books for recommendation, but this one is Permission to Feel. And I would suggest, it's from a professor in Yale, and they're going to partner with us for our product as well. But it's called, he's come up with that, we have to allow for emotions, and we need to understand what the emotion is. If we put a generic label to it, then we won't know what to do about it. But if I know what that emotion is, then I know how to manage it and how to handle it. So that's why, sort of go a little bit deeper and then figure out what's happening. So I won't, so basically we're getting back to the topic is for the transition, but those are the different things, that how you look at the viewpoint of what you look at. Instead of being so nervous and worried about it, maybe you can say, I'm excited about learning something new. I'm excited about, so your mindset will also make a big difference in the transition, whether it's going to grad school or whether it's going to work in whatever environment you find yourself.
Thank you. And I think I wanted to kind of touch on, before we move on to the next topic, the idea of your identity as a student, because a lot of people, like, since kindergarten all the way until you graduate, you've been in school for around 16 or plus years. And this is kind of a question for all three of you. How did you cope with the loss of that identity? Because I know that this is a topic that is like emerging a little bit more. Last year, I actually helped my university's counseling center create specific support groups for students who were graduating on facing this uncertainty. So what were some things that I think, so directly tied to your identity as a student, that changed from when you graduated and either entered the workforce, or in Maloney's case, when you went into a master's program?
I guess for me, I think the biggest change in terms of undergrad and grad school is definitely the social aspect. Maybe it's also because I started grad school during COVID-19, where not a lot of people are, like, our social lives are not really the same. So I think that the hardest part was definitely just having friends that that you're going to see, like, very regularly, and then going to, like, having not knowing anybody at all. And I think that in grad school, it's a little manageable in the sense that everyone that you meet is, like, doing a very similar thing to you. So that it is nice to have that community of people around you that are, sorry, there's a siren. But it's nice to have a community of people that are also working towards similar goal that you're working for. But again, I think the biggest transition is also just remembering how to put yourself out there and make new friends, because that's something that you pretty much did, like, maybe your freshman, your sophomore year of undergrad, and then you just kind of had friends and you stuck with them mainly throughout college. And then suddenly you're in this new environment. And in grad school, when you have friends in undergrad, they're all around, like, the same age as you. They have somewhat similar life experiences, but in grad school, you can meet people, like, they can be significantly older than you or younger than you. They'll have, like, different experiences, so sometimes it can be a little intimidating. And I think, like Aisha was mentioning before, the imposter syndrome, I feel like that's also something. In undergrad, you sort of come in and nobody really knows what they're doing, or, like, everybody is sort of in the same boat where we're all just starting out and learning new things. But in grad school, because people come in with different kinds of experience, it does sometimes feel like, maybe you maybe you're not supposed to be here, I guess. I don't really know how else to put it. But it is something that eventually you settle into. So I think for me, it's just reminding myself that I will settle into this situation and that I will eventually be able to make friends and understand what's going on. But I think this chaotic idea of I don't know what's going on is something that permeates a lot of our lives. At least it does for me. So I think that one of the biggest changes is not necessarily a change, but just I feel like I'm back where I was at the beginning of undergrad, where I was like, I don't know anything. And then you just kind of get used to the fact that this is a cycle. Like you've been doing this since you started middle school, then high school, then undergrad, then grad school, or industry. And you will be doing this when you move on to a new job or a new thing. So I guess it's sort of accepting that there's going to be an initial stage of getting your feet wet. But yeah, I think that was my biggest transition.
I agree with you, Melody, that the social aspect is definitely different, right? Like in college, you're interacting with people almost purely your age, whereas now when you go to work, like my team doesn't have anyone my age. Everyone's significantly older, or there's just not going to be as many new grads, right? Like you wouldn't want a team of all new grads anyway, because you would break things and it just doesn't work out. So I think it was nice in a way because I also interned at the same place. And so there were also other returning interns that I was familiar with. And so it was like a small cohort of new grads. So that was really nice. But I think aside from that, it was definitely interesting to learn how to interact with people of different ages, and people, that or just a change from what you're used to. And so yeah, like joining like the board game club at work, or like doing different activities that are available at work also allows you to interact with people more and socialize and things like that. But I agree, like you have to, since everyone's just not in the same place at the same time, you have to make more of an effort to reach out to people, or to keep like meaningful relationships with people, right? Because it's not like you just walk into class and you see them. So that's definitely a change as well. But I think also just not being scared of change is a huge thing, because there's going to be constant change and you have to be excited about it and not like scared of change, right? So yeah, I think social aspect definitely changes, but it's something that everyone essentially has to get used to.
Yeah, and then to add to that, I think what they've said makes a lot of sense. And for me, it was also, I guess I enjoyed that student identity so much that I kept going for degrees. In fact, I was in the PhD program and I accidentally got a job because I went to this seminar where they had free food. And then while I was having the free food and enjoying, one of the recruiting people asked me, well, what do you do? What kind of background do you have? And then when I said I had both statistics and computer science, they were like, oh, why don't you apply for this? Just send in your resume. And then I sent it and got campus interviews and everything. And suddenly it was like this, I have this nice job in California, or I have this PhD in Purdue University in Indiana in farmland. And it was like, whoa, once you visit California, it was like, I want to be there. So he said, maybe we should take a two-year break from PhD and just, go, you can take a 2-year break from your PhD. And so I thought, okay, let me try that. But then I never went back. Once you're in California, it's really hard to leave. So from that, but the transition was, and then because I was in the PhD program, I interviewed really well because I had just done my qualifiers and everything was so current. So again, like that imposter syndrome, I got into this. They thought I was so much more smarter than I think I am or think I was at that time. So I got into this company called Broadvision, which was very elite. So the people were everyone was at least 10 years older than the people because they had said that we've never hired directly from college before. This was their first time going to college, and they were so excited that they found this person who really fit in. And I was like, okay, really, let's try this out. But then what I realized is just getting really interested. So I had to develop different communication skills, because you don't just talk to them like you talk to your friends who are your age, but just taking a genuine interest in who they are, what their lives are, because everyone's life is interesting, right? I mean, if you talk to them enough, you'll find something nice about them, something useful, something interesting. And so slowly I developed those skills that, okay, they do different things on the weekend than I would think of doing, but hey, I can go for a hike with them. So then I started, going for hikes with them, sort of finding activities that we could do together. So then I had a broad range of friends who were, some were 10 years younger than me, some who were 20 years older than me. And it's kind of a nice thing, but it takes a little time, and you have to have a little bit of patience with that, just to develop those skills, and being patient. And listening skills are really important. So, paying attention and taking note of what people like or don't like. Then we had a few people who knew how to talk French. So we created a French club. So if it doesn't exist, just create one of your own, right? You find a few people who have a common interest and say, hey, let's have lunch together and talk French or whatever. So things like that, right? So sometimes if the situation doesn't exist, you can try to create it yourself. If you're looking for a situation and feeling, oh no, this isn't happening, let's try to make it up. Like, let's try to make it happen. It may not work out, but at least you made an attempt. So that's how slowly I got along. And then after that, I went to Sun, which had a wide range of people, but the first one was a very interesting job. But the interesting part was then you learned so much from these people. These people who had 10 years more experience, but they were very elite engineers. So in fact, some of you have done programming. So I'll give you a little example. I went in and I had to make some edits to a certain piece of code. And they said, oh, this person has written it. So I went to talk to him, and he had written that 10 years earlier. But this guy was he looked at the code, and then he went up to the board and he started explaining it to me as if it was some poetry. I've never seen engineers who can remember their code even from 2 days ago. And this guy here is telling me something from 10 years ago, because he had put so much attention and to the detail and how he had designed that whole thing. So that really inspired me to actually, take the time to design and really think through what I'm doing rather than doing things quickly. And so I started becoming more of a big picture person, and sort of that developed how I grew as a person as well. So yeah, so every person you meet, you can find something interesting to work with them on, and then I found it to be very helpful.
Thank you all for those experiences. Yeah. And I think we've all been leaning into the topic of social stress and just how to put yourself in different groups and manage your social setting in that way. So we'd like to move on to our next question, which is more gearing towards this sort of independency or newfound independency that you find with postgraduate life, particularly in trying to craft your own schedule, manage your own hobbies or create new ones, manage your meals, or even just choosing friends. So was this overwhelming for you? How did you balance this independency? And if you have any specific anecdotes too, feel free to share them. So I guess we can start off with Maloney and Aisha.
I think for me, like as I was going through college, I would slowly start to become, I guess, more independent in the sense that I would cook more, I would try to take care of more of my own finances and things like that that would, I guess, intimidate you when you were like starting out. Um, and I think that for me, like when I graduated college, it just kind of got to the point where I was comfortable doing a lot of those things already, where I felt like I was ready to do them. So I didn't necessarily like now after graduation, I didn't necessarily have that period where I was like, oh, I have to do this or I'm intimidated by this. But I think that something that really helped me was just the idea that whatever, like there isn't anything actually stopping you from trying these things, like whether it be like a new hobby or like learning how to cook or learning how to manage your finances or to even make new friends. Like it can be a very intimidating situation. Um, but a lot of it is just, I guess, sort of sitting down and talking to yourself. At least that's what I do a lot of, where I just sort of ask myself, why I find it intimidating or why, like, what exactly is stopping me from learning something new or trying something new. And in the end, the answer is generally just yourself. Like, it will be that maybe you thought that you couldn't, or that you think that people might think it's weird. But I guess at the end of the day, for me, like when, like for example, in quarantine, in college, I used to make a lot of very bland, tasteless food. So in quarantine, I like decided that I would actually try to make dishes that I genuinely enjoyed, even though I didn't think I was that good at cooking, or I didn't like, I guess I just didn't know if I could do it. But then I sort of got into like watching videos of people making food and trying new recipes. And then I liked the stuff that I made so much that I actually decided to like go vegan, which is something that I was not sure I could do before. So I think that in terms of like even reaching out to new people or trying new things, telling yourself that you can is a really huge thing. Like, I think that it's really important to be your own cheerleader. And that sounds really cliche, but I feel like it's true. Um, and I guess also in terms of making friends, I think eventually when you do, like this is what Preeti was saying earlier, but when you do talk to people, you will find that will have something in common with them, or you'll find something about them that you find interesting enough to sort of continue a genuine connection. So I think that the first step is always the hardest, the first step, which is reaching out. But if it makes you feel better, I'm sure that there are plenty of people who are in the same boat as you who also want to reach out to you but are intimidated. And I think that a lot of people say, "Oh, well, yeah, I guess, sure," like they don't really believe it. But that happened to me where like especially in like the first month of my grad program, I would text my friends and talk about how I don't have any friends in my program and how I really want to reach out to people, but I don't know how to do it. And so eventually someone actually reached out to me and she told me that, she was intimidated by reaching out to people, but she was also in the same boat. And we sort of became friends that way. So I think that it is, it does feel a little ridiculous when people tell you that, but there are like people in the same boat as you. And everyone wants to reach out to people and try new things. So I think that like maybe try not to hold yourself back.
Yeah, in terms of independency, I think financial independency was definitely a newfound thing. Like, you no longer have to depend on your parents for allowance every month or on like a part time job in college. Um, and so for me, I became very interested in like how do I want to go about managing my money, right? Like, um, if I want to, let's say, invest in a property when I'm at the age of like 25, how do I set myself up to do that? And how do I manage my 401k? How do I do all these adult things, right? Um, and so I became very interested in like managing my money and investing in stocks and things like that. And actually at work, I made connections with people just because we would talk about stocks or we would talk about investing or whatever. Um, so in terms of financial independence, there was that. In terms of other independence, yeah, it's nice. Like, you're no longer sitting in, some classes that are required for graduation, but you're not really interested in, right? So now you can kind of craft what you're interested in. Like at work, what do you want to work on? Like, whatever you want to work on, you can. Um, there's no one mandating that you can only do certain things, right? Like, if you have new ideas, you can bring them up, you can work on them. And so I think in terms of intellectual curiosity, that was also very cool, um, to see that, like, if I found issues in our existing system, um, I could take that up and, like, propose solutions and things like that. So essentially it became interesting because it was more of what I want to do versus what, is set out for me to do. Um, what else? In terms of, I guess, it was also interesting because In college, like Maloney was saying, you become very independent in terms of doing things for yourself and making decisions for yourself and stuff like that. And so when you move back home, obviously it's a little bit different because the last time your parents saw you was when you were, or the last time you lived at home was when you were in high school, right? And so they still view you as like a child or whatever it may be. And I know a lot of people face this, but so that was definitely a change. I recently moved to San Francisco, so there's that. But I think like there was a little bit of adjustment in understanding that they may not have realized certain things that you think you can do independently that they still feel like you can't or whatever. But yeah, I think like at least being able to live at home also came with being able to see your parents every day or your siblings every day, which was super nice. And that was something I really cherished a lot. But yeah, so those are some of the changes that I noticed for sure.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, I think these are all very good points and very valuable. And I wanted to elaborate a little bit on sometimes when you go into a work environment, there are lots of different kinds of people. And sometimes they'll frown, they'll do something, even whether it's going to grad school or whenever you go into a different environment, we tend to be very sensitive. So we're watching out for signs. Do they like me? Do they, am I doing the right thing? And that can also cause a lot of confusion. So it's always good to validate if you're thinking, don't take anything personally. If somebody's frowning, maybe they just have a stomach ache, just don't assume that it's because of what you said. If you have to tell yourself a story, tell a good one, right? If you don't know, or just validate it. Because sometimes if you feel at work, sometimes you might find that a certain person in certain meetings or all meetings sort of has a harsh interaction with you. And then you might start forming this opinion about, maybe I'm wrong, what is going on? So either validate the story you're telling yourself, you can always go up to them, be vulnerable, which is a little hard to do initially, but once you do it, once you put it out there, then you'll see how much people will receive you and you will not stay confused for too long. You can just say, hey, I'm a little confused. I thought I had suggested something and you didn't seem to like it. You don't have to say it in front of everyone, but just go to them personally or set up a meeting with them. So try to get these little things out of your way quickly. Even if it's with a professor or a teacher, sometimes you feel like, oh, they don't like me, they're not grading whatever, for whatever reason. So before you tell yourself a story and start getting caught up in your own story, just make sure it's a true story. Otherwise, if you don't have the option, then tell a nice story, right? I used to have, when I was in grad school, I had to teach a class and there was this girl who used to come and sit in the front row, and it was a very early morning, like 7:30 or 8:30 in the morning, there was a class, and she would sit right in the front row, and then she'd be sitting and rolling her eyes all the time. And I was very new, I had come from India, and I was a little nervous trying to teach, and I was like, why, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong? But I still cared for her. So at one point, and then she ended up getting, like, she was getting a bad grade in the class. So I called her for office hours and I said, what happened? You're sitting right in front of the class and what's going on? She says, oh no, what happens? I couldn't take any other class. I had to take this early class and I've been so sleepy. I'm just trying not to fall asleep in that class, but I really want to do well in this class. So then I realized, that, so as I was first thinking, oh, my class must be boring, then I decided to say, well, I don't know what she's thinking. So maybe she just has defective eyes or something. I just made up a story that was a fun story for me. So every time I saw her rolling her eyes, I would just smile and not get upset or concerned that, oh my God, I'm doing something wrong. So I'm just saying that, just try to see the situation and see how you can, if you can confront it or, deal with it directly, that's the best possible way, be vulnerable and say, hey, I'm confused. I think you're not liking this or you feel like that. And let that person tell you the truth. Or if you cannot do it, then if you have to tell yourself a story, tell a good one so you can enjoy life. And also not taking things personally, because especially at work, I mean, we're used to that. You get a grade in school, but at work, it's very different. People will not tell you directly. You have to wait for this evaluation. It's like sometimes it's a 3 months or a 6 months time frame. And in school, you sort of know what will get you a good, you sort of have figured it out. At some point, it's very predictable, but at work, it's very different. It doesn't have to be your vocation. It doesn't have to be your job, right? Make it a hobby, because it's good to have your passion, because that's what gives you energy to keep going. But many people get confused that I have to have my passion and my job has to be passion. Sometimes it cannot be. Sometimes your passion may not pay enough to live the lifestyle that you want. So you may sometimes end up, maybe it's your first job, maybe you'll find a better job later, but sometimes you just have to work, to stand on your own feet and get ahead and do something that, and if you work well enough, if you take a lot of interest, you will find anything interesting, right? If whatever you resist will have a power over you, but whatever you accept and go along with will have no power over you. And so just play that out and also think about that. So, try to find some hobbies that keep your energy up and don't just make it one thing. So if you're in grad school or whatever it is you are doing, it shouldn't be just work, right? Find time to exercise, find time to do other things as well. At least have one other hobby or a passion that you spend time on, even on weekends or something, and schedule that in. Don't say, oh, I don't have time for this, because then you'll start losing energy, you'll start losing motivation, and you'll have a hard time.
Aisha or Maloney, anything else you'd like to add? Any parting words?
Thank you. It was great to hear from Aisha and Preeti. And just that, I guess my parting advice would just be to know that you can do it. There will be times where it might feel super daunting. Just this whole transition can feel like a lot. But if it makes you feel better, people before you have done it and they made it through, and so can you.
I think not a lot of people talk about this transition, which I think is a little bit interesting because, like Kevin said, you have been in school for the previous 20 years of life. And so it for sure is a different change. But I think it's nice in a lot of ways. I mean, yeah, it comes with its pros and cons, but it's definitely a good change. And I agree with Preeti though, you can't making everything about work kind of becomes mundane, and you lose energy, right? And like she was saying, maintaining your energy, not letting things consume you, is kind of the largest thing you can do to keep your mental health. So yeah, doing things like going on a walk every day and listening to audiobooks or something, that's what I've been doing during quarantine, which has been very nice. But yeah, just doing things that you enjoy, and adding more to your life that's not just work or school. But yeah, thanks to Maloney and Preeti as well. It was really great to hear different perspectives.
Nice. And if I can just add one more thing that sticks to me, which I think will be very helpful for all, is Mother Teresa's advice that you don't have to do big things. Just do small things, but with a lot of love. So whatever thing you're doing, just put your passion, you put your time and energy into it, and life will be interesting and fun. You don't have to be doing huge, big things all the time, right? So that's one thing that, just the little things in life have so much value. If you can find that, and if you can learn to appreciate that, your life will be joyful, and stresses will come, but you'll be able to overcome them.